Hello and welcome to another booktube video from me, Martha May Books, and today I have for you a video that I originally saw on Mina Reads' channel, which I'll link down below. I'll link her original video, which is tier ranking all of the classics that I read in high school. Some of these aren't actually classics, they're kind of modern books, but I was forced to read them by my school and therefore I am going to be ranking them. I have had this video in the works for quite a long time, but if you have been in the tier ranking realms, then you will know that it's really hard to find a tier ranking website that doesn't look like it's going to steal all of your data. So instead I've made a template on Canva and I'm going to do it on that instead. So hopefully don't judge me too harshly for that. I was just frightened of the websites. So let's get into it. So the first book that I have here is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Here she is. So I have mixed feelings about Wuthering Heights. The thing about Wuthering Heights is that I didn't really like it at the time. I didn't like any of the characters and I hated studying it. But at the same time, I own 3 copies of it, one of which I've bought of my own volition, so clearly I like it a bit. So I think I'm going to put it in B, because it's super weird and I definitely hate the start. If you've read Wuthering Heights, you know that the start is like that guy like sleeping in his bed and being like, oh, Kathy's knocking at the window. So weird. I'm not a fan. So maybe I'll put it in C actually, because I'm not a fan. It's really weird. Then I've got Woman in Black by Susan Hill. I had kind of a Woman in Black heavy year when I was at school because we studied it in drama and we also studied it in English, and the drama teachers would get annoyed every time you spoke about what you learn in English, and the English teachers would get annoyed every time you spoke about what you learn in drama, so that was really fun. But Woman in Black is, I'm going to say it's a B. I would give it an A, but it's just not quite good enough. Like, it's quite good, but it's not that scary. Or is it? I don't know because I've not read them for ages. Okay, how did I feel about it at the time? Do you know what? I liked it, and then I read it, like, by myself. So surely I feel like that's an A. Then I've got The Tempest, which I studied for A-level English. And The Tempest actually is quite a good time. Like, it's super weird, but it's quite a good time. It's definitely got weird parts. I'm going to put it in C, because it's got weird parts, but it's also all right. Okay, next we've got another play that I did for A-level that I hated. This is The Rivals by Richard Brinsley Sheridan. It's about a whole bunch of posh people in Bath being idiots and getting themselves shot and being stupid. It's meant to be a comedy. It's the most rubbish thing I've ever read in my life. Sorry, Richard, but it was bad. Okay. Next, I've got Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. So I know I own a couple of Daphne du Maurier books anyway, and Rebecca is such a good time. Like, the protagonist of Rebecca is so rubbish, but it's not really her fault. So I'm going to put this as an S, because it's a good time. I would read it outside of reading it for school if I cared to. I haven't, but if I cared to, I would. There's a wasp knocking at my window, but I would read it outside of school. It basically follows this girl who we don't know her name, and she marries this guy called Max de Winter, and Max de Winter's ex-wife, Rebecca, was really great and everyone loved her, and the main girl is trying to live up to the first Mrs. de Winter, and it's spooky and it's a good time. Then I have got Othello by William Shakespeare, another Shakespeare. Now, I don't like Othello. Not the guy. I don't like the play. I don't like Othello. It's just, like, I'm not that big of a fan of Shakespeare. Like, I like to go and see the Shakespeare plays. Sure, crack on. But reading it, it's so boring to read. Like, how boring. So I think I'm going to put it with The Tempest. Sorry, William Shakespeare, not good enough. Then we've got Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, which I think I did for A-level? GCSE? I can't remember. It was all one to me. So this follows a whole bunch of kids in this boarding school, but they're kind of weird, and I'm not going to tell you why. What do I think of this? I liked it, actually, and this is probably one of the books that I think about the most from high school, because it's so interesting, and I've still got it, and I intend... Oh, it's right here. And I intend to reread it at some point. So I think I'm going to go for an A for that one. Okay, next we've got, this is the best book in the world. If you have not read it, read it. Get your grubby little paws on this book and read it. It's glorious. This is The Monk by Matthew Lewis. So, The Monk by Matthew Lewis is this gothic book that was written in, I don't know when, but he was like 19 when he wrote it. And it's the funniest thing you've ever read in your life. It's like, okay, well, maybe not you, but for me. It's basically about this, like, monk, well, it's called The Monk, who, who, like, gets tricked by the devil, and there are demons in it, there are highwaymen, there are, side plots about ghosts. It's such a good time. Like, this is S tier. This is like a tier even above Rebecca. Like, it needs its own tier. It's so good. And like, obviously it's not good as in like, oh, what a literary masterpiece. I don't know about that, couldn't tell you. But what it is good is it is so stupid and I love it. So please read it if you're interested. From that recommendation. It's one of my favourite books. Definitely my favourite classic of all time. Because like, if you're familiar with Gothic literature, it's like that, but like written by a 17-year-old boy. It's so good. Okay, then we've got Lord of the Flies by William Golding. Now, technically, I didn't have to read this in high school. This was the other GCSEs group book that they had to read. But I read it anyway because I was a fan of books as a child and still am today. I'm going to put this in B tier. It's fine, but weird. And if I wasn't trying to show off to the English teachers, I wouldn't have continued to read it. Then we've got The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I also had to study this for A-level. I did not like it. I don't like Gatsby, I don't like Nick, I don't like either of the women, or that one woman who has a baby and hates it. I don't like the fact that it's called Egg. I just don't like it. Just not my vibe. I'm going to put it in D. Because I found no joy in it, but I didn't hate it. Okay, then we've got another really good one. So I did, if you couldn't tell from The Monk, I did sort of like, one of my modules was kind of on Gothic literature, which I adore. And one of them was Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the 1818 text. I just listened recently to a podcast from the BBC called You're Dead to Me, which was a glorious time and I loved it. All about Mary Shelley, and it was really interesting actually to hear about because I didn't know all of the stuff that they said, and Mary Shelley had such a full-on life. But yeah, Frankenstein, first of all, the monster in this I love, but I love him glorious, but Victor I hate. And I also hate that, like, that set of chapters where Victor Frankenstein and his little friend are rowing on a river for ages, and it's like, sorry, you've just created life. Can you, like, look after it? Like, such a mess. However, you know, that's sort of what Percy was doing, so that was what Mary Shelley knew. So am I going to put it in A? I feel like I want to put it in A because, like, well done Mary Shelley. She also is a teenager writing Gothic fiction, basically science fiction. But it's not a B because it is good. But it's just like, it could have been better. I know that she's like, you know, a visionary and glorious and it's great. But also like the star's kind of boring and it's never like horror. It's always like, I just feel so sorry for the little monster guy. So I'm going to put it in A, but I'm not sold on that. Continuing the Gothic theme, I have Dracula by Bram Stoker. So for my A-levels, we were allowed, within the realm of Gothic novels, we had to read The Monk and Frankenstein, but then we could choose a third book that we would write about in comparison to some poems or something. I don't really remember, but I chose Dracula because I like vampires, and Dracula is a good time, let me tell you. This, now, is it an S or is it an A? It's sort of between the two, because it's a good time, a lot of letters, a lot of making a hasty toilet, a lot of blood transfusions, which, like, okay, go off, Van Helsing. But I didn't love it as much as The Monk. Nothing quite reaches The Monk. In fact, I'm going to put Rebecca halfway as well, because, like, just nothing's as good as The Monk. Please read it, and if you have read it, please tell me in the comments what you thought of it, because I just loved it. I just love it. Okay, so then I have the final book I'm going to talk about. Here it is, the absolute snorefest that is Enduring Love by Ian McEwan. Oh, I'm not a fan of Ian McEwan, but I have read almost all of his new releases as they've come out since reading Enduring Love. Not sure why, but my gran keeps buying them for me and I keep reading them, so, you know. So Enduring Love is about it's about two men who witness a balloon accident where someone dies, and then one of the men becomes obsessed with the other. And it's sort of like, oh, who's obsessed with who? You're all obsessed with yourself. I'm not having any of it. It's going in D. I didn't like it. There we are. I feel like I've not given you enough of like a thing about what the books are about. Do you care, or like, is this my rating and you're happy with it? Maybe I'll go through it and I'll tell you a bit more about them in case you're interested. And if you're not interested, here's my rating, here's my tier ranking of all of the books that I read in high school. I must have read more, but these are like for GCSE and A level, and before that I don't remember what we read. So I'm going to go with these, and then I'm going to tell you more about them. So The Monk, I've told you about The Monk. It's a good time. It's about a monk who, he's such a silly boy. I love it. Please read it. Please read it. It's so good. Right, then we've got The Woman in Black by Susan Hill, which is like a gothic, I don't think it's written in gothic time because Susan Hill was alive recently, but it's about this guy who is a lawyer, and they're like, hey lawyer guy, go and do some lawyering in this big old spooky house, and he keeps seeing this spooky woman called the Woman in Black. And also there's a lot going on about marshes. Never Let Me Go, I've told you as much as I can tell you, and as much as I'm going to tell you. Frankenstein, if you don't know, it's about a guy, an idiot, called Victor Frankenstein, who spends months and months and months sewing up bits of corpses to make life, the whole time procrastinating from getting married to his fiancée and making life in the more conventional way. Then we've got Dracula, vampire story, probably the most famous, about a guy called Dracula. Well, it's about a guy called William Harker, is that his name? Harker, at least. And he is a lawyer. Don't be a lawyer in a gothic novel because you'll get got, and that's a fact. William Harker goes to get he goes to Dracula's castle because Dracula wants to move to England. He wants to buy a house, and William Harker is there to smooth the process. And then he gets trapped in a castle. His girlfriend in somewhere is like, oh, my boyfriend's gone. And then there's something maybe to do with moons. And Van Helsing's there, and he's not a vampire hunter. He's just a guy who loves to perform a blood transfusion on a woman. And that's Dracula. I've told you about Rebecca. Lord of the Flies. I'm sure loads of people know all of these synopsises because they are like pretty famous books, but I'm going to tell you about them. Lord of the Flies, William Golding, is about a bunch of like boys. They're not like boys, they are boys. A bunch of boys somehow end up on an island, and they all start fighting each other over glasses and conch shells and a guy in a parachute. And that is Lord of the Flies. And not everyone dies, but there is definitely death in there somewhere. Wuthering Heights. Now, Wuthering Heights let me tell you. Another Gothic novel, they love Gothic at my school, is about this girl called Kathy who's in love with this boy called Heathcliff, who her dad brought in off of the streets when he went on a day trip to London. And there's some other children that live on a house across some moors or something, and those children, one of them also loves Kathy, and there's fighting and arguing. I wrote a terrible essay about why the houses in Wuthering Heights are characters. Don't know why I did that to myself. Tempest, do we know? People wash up on an island, Prospero's there, and he's a salty little man because he was meant to be the king and he's not the king. Othello. I don't really remember this one, but I think it's about a guy who's tricked by his servant or something to kill his wife. I think you've put your loyalty in the wrong place there, Othello, if I'm totally honest. Great Gatsby. Okay, so this is set in like the 20s, and there's this guy called Nick who's obsessed with this guy called Gatsby, who throws loads of parties because he fancies this woman called Daisy, who has a green light on at her dock, and everyone loves talking about the symbolism of the green light, but to be honest, I think she just needed to guide some boats in at night. And Gatsby's obsessed with Daisy. Daisy's married to this horrible little man. What I took from this is you shouldn't drive cars at speed near swimming pools. You shouldn't run near a swimming pool either, it's a hazard. Enduring Love, I've told you about it. Okay, then we've got The Rivals. I've told you about this. Loads of people in Bath doing duels, as you can see on the cover. This woman's dramatic. It's meant to be a comedy, but I just hated it. It's like not funny at all. Like maybe the people in Bath at the time in like the Georgian era, or whenever it was, found it funny because they didn't have like stand-up comedians or like TV or literally any other form of entertainment, but it's like, oh, not good. So those are all of the books that I read when I was at high school. As you can tell, the only one I really loved is The Monk. So there we are, that's my tier ranking. Right, I'm going to end my little meeting now because I've been recording on Zoom. Thank you so much for watching my tier ranking of the required reading. I'm sorry that I was slightly vague about what the synopsises of these books are. I just read them so long ago and I just remember how I felt about them at the time. I'd love to do a reread of The Monk and tell you guys my updated thoughts on it because I love The Monk. The whole reason I did this video is just to advertise to you guys how good The Monk is. Like, it's really weird, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not endorsing anything that happens in it, it's just funny. If you have read any of these books, if you had to read them for high school, or you read them for your personal fun, please let me know where you would place them on my tier ranking, or any tier ranking. I just stole the tier ranking, put ferns behind it, because I love ferns, my favourite plant. Have I got anything else to say? Thank you for watching, tell me about the books, goodbye.